You are a daddy producer.
What does that
Yeah.
mean?
I
like
think
this.
daddy is, for us with Not Your Daddy's Films, we called it that because it's like a cheeky way to take back this very patriarchal industry and be like, we're all daddy here. Doesn't matter what your gender is. Like we all deserve a piece of the pie, a place on top.
I love it.
So anyone who's inclusive and getting stuff done. Do you curse on your podcast?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
anybody who's getting shit done is a daddy. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. So I'm Vika and I am from Daddy Dailies. I'm with
Carolina Gropa, and I am with the podcast Angle on Producers.
I am the podcast.
I am the podcast. That was weird.
No,
but it's
I love
true.
it.
I mean, it's like my name is on there, so that's
it's amazing.
That's what I do.
Well, we're really both excited for this crossover episode, and I know Daddy Dailies' emphasis is on conversations with women and non-binary creatives, just to talk about like how you got your start, how you created a career for yourself in this industry. And you have worked on so many incredible projects, and I feel like just such a breadth and scope of work that is sometimes unusual, like from documentaries to narrative. And I know that producing, which is, I'm sure you'll talk about when I ask you about the podcast, can be really confusing to people because there's so many different kinds of producers.
Yeah.
Creative, line producer, a UPM, and you've done all of it.
Yes.
Which is incredible. So something I get asked a lot as a founding daddy at Not Your Daddy's Films is like, how do I build community in a genuine way, in a way where I'm actually making friends and finding collaborators that I want to spend time with, but that is also building my career. Was that hard for you to do at first? Was it easy to find the people that you clicked with and wanted to work with, or was it a little like trial and error?
All of the above.
Yeah.
Not the answer people want, but that's the truth. Like, I've been at this for almost 20 years and it's just time. I think that's the reality. It takes a lot of time to find your right collaborators. It's like dating, you know, like some people get lucky and meet their partner in high school or whatever at the beginning of whatever that journey is,
and some
right?
people spend a lot of time on Hinge.
That's right. And some people date a lot of frogs, right? Kiss a lot of frogs or whatever. So I think every experience is valuable, but there is a ton of like weeding out the people that are not your people. And like, I almost talk about it like an energetic click. Like there's a wavelength that you just are on with some people and some people you're not. And it doesn't mean that you can't collaborate with them, but only some people are going to like parallel path it with you. And I think it's tempting to look at people that are a lot ahead of you and go, I want to be in community with them. And you should absolutely aspire to that.
Yeah.
As long as you don't overlook the people that are to your left and to your right and your contemporaries, because those are the people that are going to help you ascend much faster than the people that you perceive to be so much further than you. Like, yes, they'll hopefully help you and you can collaborate with them, but to not overlook the communities that you're already in, which is why, like, I think with what Daddy has built and what we're building with Angle on Producers is so special, because people meet at these events.
Yeah.
And there's already an alignment of intention, of vibes to some extent. And then you kind of find your clusters within those pockets of communities that you can then go on and develop things with. And even though someone could, you know, have the same sort of like on paper value system, doesn't mean that they're your creative collaborator.
Yeah.
And it takes time to find that out. And sometimes you just have to throw yourself off a cliff and figure it out the hard way, you know?
Yeah.
Because one person's like coffee is not someone's cup of tea or whatever. I don't know. I just made that up. But like, it just takes, it's like trial and error. Really.
Yeah.
It really is. And it was that for me, for sure. A lot of heartbreaks along the way. A lot of people that I thought were my people that weren't.
That's hard. Yeah.
It is hard, but that's the truth. You know, it takes time sometimes.
Do you find that you end up working with the same people again once you find
Absolutely,
that?
because it takes so long, right? So when you can, you want to have your go-to homies that you have a shorthand with, that you know you can be like a full human version of yourself without taking away from the professional expectations, right?
Yes.
That's really important. And it's why you see the people that have escalated in their careers. Look at like Sean Baker and Alex Coco and Samantha Kwan. Granted, Samantha and Sean are married, but you know, Alex Coco, these people that have been with these filmmakers in partnership, creative collaborations for a long time, they're not going to like leave. And like, if you're at a panel and you meet Sean Baker and you want to like take over for his next, you want to be his next producer, it's going to be really hard to build that relationship and that trust that someone else already has. So is that the best use of your time, or is it to find your own Sean Baker, your own Alex Coco right now that you can grow and develop with, you know?
I think that's such a good point. It's about knowing your taste and knowing the kind of work you want to make, and then finding the people who are also aligned that way.
And that takes time, right? Like we are all growing and changing as artists all the time. So like what was my taste 10 years ago maybe isn't my taste now. Do you have a community that is also evolving with you and your taste and your skill set? Like the stuff I was making maybe 15 years ago, I don't want to be making that same stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I want to graduate. We all do. So I think it's important to have people along the journey that are willing to evolve with you.
When you discovered producing as a career path, you've done a lot of these different roles: UPM, line producer, creative producer. Was there something you gravitated to first? Could you maybe give a little taste of what those different producing roles entail? I have a friend who's worked for a writer, for a showrunner, and she thought she wanted to write, and she's talented, but now that she's in it, she's like, wow, the producing angle is way more what I want to be doing. And I didn't know that because I wasn't exposed to it before.
Correct. Yeah. And the mystifying thing about it is, even if you were exposed, producing is one of those things that is such an apprenticeship job. You really learn by doing and find your like in and your style within producing, that even if I did like a seminar for you on like all the differences, you wouldn't know which version of that you like until you got to experience it for yourself. So to me, producers are people that are endlessly curious and like thrive in chaos, and they have
I love that.
And they have like some type of like finger on the pulse of the creative process and creativity, certainly, but they're the people that are going to really thrive in everything else that's going to support a vision for a creative. And that is inherently creative, because you're always supporting a vision that has a budget and a schedule and limitations on that. And you can't just throw money at things. So you have to come to the table with creative solutions towards how we make anything.
Right.
But when I started producing, I didn't know. Similarly, I came out here to pursue acting, and producing was sort of, at the time, I felt like a backdoor entrance into acting because I wasn't getting.
Because you could make your own projects.
That's right. Yeah. And I couldn't get the opportunities I wanted. I was like, labeled ethnically ambiguous. No one knew what to do with me. So I was like, well, if I'm the one putting it together, then they can't tell me no.
Yeah,
was sort of the
that
idea, right? And it was at the cusp of like a lot of this movement. YouTube had to sort of really come on the scene in a really real way. And digital was really becoming a thing. Like, I feel very old aging myself, but that's the truth. Like, Britt Marling had just come on the scene, the Duplass brothers, like Awkward Black Girl, like all of these things that felt so possible if you were willing to commit to the craft of like being a content creator, writing and producing and acting and being down to edit, and like the hustle you have to have for that is admirable. But it's also like, I don't want to say a young person's game, because it's not about age as it is about energy and bandwidth to take those kind of risks at certain points of your career. But so anyway, I started producing, and when I got into it, I was like, oh, like this is what producing is. And at the time, I would define it as just like the person who makes it happen. You just figure it out. Like, first thing I ever produced was a play I optioned, or I actually licensed a limited run of a play that was a well-known play. I'd never done that before, right? Yeah. So it's like, it's seeing that you have a want and going, I don't know all the steps to get there, but I'm going to figure them out.
Yeah.
It's that time and time again in bigger scales and different scopes. But once I figured it out, I was like, oh, I've been doing this my whole life. This is just me.
Doing that play, how come you weren't like, is it money? Like that you didn't want to go directly into theater, or do you still want to do more theater?
I went into theater because I loved theater. That's most actors' first love, of course. And I have been workshopping a character. It's Spike Heels by Teresa Rebecca. And I have been workshopping the character of Georgie for a long time. So it felt like the right move. I knew I could get money and it wasn't going to be as expensive. I just knew there was a faster pathway. It's also part of a theater company. So I talk a lot on my podcast about like leaning into what you have. So at the time, even getting access to digital cameras was hard. Like, iPhones were coming on the scene. Nobody was shooting stuff on iPhones. Yeah. Like, we were still years before that. So the low-hanging fruit of what was accessible to me was like, well, I'm a part of a theater troupe. I know a bunch of incredible theater actors. I have access to a stage. I can run for 6 weeks, like, but I have to pay for that. It's not going to be free.
To find money.
So I can raise money and do this and put it together in this way. And that's what I did, you know,
Yeah.
and I loved the process of doing it. But ultimately, you know, obviously producing theater in LA is like
Yeah.
not a viable game. But it really taught me a lot of things. And one of the consequences, if you will, or wins of that experience was so many friends with shorts were like, will you help me put this together? Will you help me make my thing?
You
And I
now
was
have
like,
a proof of concept,
yeah,
truly of doing it.
doing it. And everything I've done in my career, truly, if you look at my credits, it's always with that same seed of like, I haven't done it. I don't know exactly how to do it, but I know I'm going to find the steps and the right people to help me along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then in that vein, some of your credits are documentary or unscripted and like some really inspiring stories. Was that something you saw yourself doing, documentary?
No, I mean, I just wanted to tell stories like a
Yeah.
lot of people. And the first thing I ever produced, like full feature production film, was a documentary called Autism in Love. It was my first time putting something together as a full-fledged capital P, soup to nuts producer. Years and years.
Because docs often like you're piecing
but
together.
I knew, because at the time we shot it in like 2010, I want to say 2011. And this was like Jira Dreams of Sushi had just come on. Like Netflix was really well known for like the doc space. And so I knew that there was a version of doc productions where you could be in production forever because you're running out of money, you're shooting as you go. And then there were these like sort of contained production windows.
Yeah.
And so what I pitched to them, I was like, we are only going to shoot for 9 months. Period. Whatever story we get in those 9 months, we have to make a doc out of those 9 months of worth of story. Otherwise, when you're dealing especially with subjects where it's people's lives, there's no production stop date on someone's life, you know? And you can't also overextend yourself to be there for every moment. So with Autism in Love, we got lucky in that the people that we ended up following ended up having these monumental things happen in their lives during the course of our production.
Yeah.
But we always knew that come a certain date, we had to wrap it up. And so, but even then, it still took 3 years by the time we like raised the money, figured out, because I had no connection to the autism field beyond, I've talked about this story on other podcasts, but the reason I got into this very specific, interesting niche is I had found a job on Craigslist.
Oh my goodness.
That was a survival job working for a doctor who was a pioneer in the autism field.
Wow.
As an admin exec, like remote, before that was a cute thing. And he knew that I was doing this job because I wanted the financial security that gave me to then go produce for no money, which is what it was in the beginning, to get the experience, to get the exposure. And after a couple of years of doing that, he was like, I want to do something related to adults on the autism spectrum and romantic relationships. Will you help me? And that's when I realized no one was talking about this yet. There was nothing in the medical journals.
There was no Love on the Spectrum.
Love on the Spectrum came after our doc. No one's talking about this. This is the time. The time is now. And so it was just, again, product of that. And I was like, I haven't done a doc, but I know enough that I'll figure it out. And what I did is every documentary that I had seen of the last few years, I found a way to call those producers, and I was like, here's who I am. Here's what I've done. I haven't done this before. Help me. Like, what are the things?
You did that.
I just call up people, and you'd be surprised like how few people do this and how gracious people will be with their time if you respect their time in the ask. So it's not just like, give me all the things. It's like, you put this together. You had these challenges. How did you overcome? I saw from my research that right?
Yeah.
If you come in with a really specific ask, people are willing to give you their time because it shows you respect their time. And so I've actually mastered the art of cold emailing over the years because I've just like, I don't know the answer, but I'm going to find out. And I'm going to ask people to help me along the way.
Truly great advice. I think at every stage of the game, you are either doing the reaching out because someone has information that you want or someone's reaching out to you.
That's right.
Being at a stage in my career where I'm on the receiving end sometimes, I'm like, oh, yes, you can pick my brain, but have questions. Know what it is that you're looking for, because I can talk forever and it's going to be a lot more helpful to you and more respectful, like you said, of my time. Yeah. And so I try to do the same thing if I'm reaching out to others.
Exactly.
You know?
And it's part of what led me eventually to start the podcast, because so I had worked and docs, just to back up, but like
Yeah.
I knew that wasn't like at the time, it was like, oh, you're a doc producer now, you know, the doc
Right.
did really well. We premiered at Tribeca at the time,
Mhm.
world premiere, which is a big deal. We sold to Netflix, which was a huge deal, sold to PBS. We got an
Huge.
Emmy
And that was
nomination.
your first
My
doc,
first thing,
full
my
feature
first
length
feature thing
thing.
out the gate. And frankly, till this date, and that was 10 years ago that we premiered at Tribeca, but it's been the only thing really in all my credits, to be fair, that has been solely mine, right?
Wow.
Like I produced it, I put it together. Every single step of the way. I still deal with the LLC up until this day. It's like my project, along with my partners on that. Of course, I'm not trying to take credit where it isn't due, but everything else I've been a producer for hire, which is a very different thing. So what I realized after making Autism in Love is that I wanted to be in narratives. That's kind of what got me in the game, but I wanted to make money. So I went and made and did commercials and whatever, branded, and I worked my way up. I started in the production office and eventually was producing and touched every rung of that ladder. And then after some years of doing that, I was like, well, I'm going to leverage this experience to now break into independent features. This was around 2015. Things were really booming from 2015 till the pandemic. There was a lot of production, especially here in LA. And I shot almost every film you see on my resume was shot here, which is also like makes me an anomaly.
So amazing.
Yeah.
And frankly, especially right now in 2025.
Yeah.
So unheard
I mean,
of.
it's unheard of, right? Like the first time I ever shot fully out of state was in 21. Prior to that, every single movie
that's a whole
here.
different ballgame. From I worked at Sony for 5 years and I was in the production department. And something that I didn't realize prior to working there was who is getting hired out of state, who's getting hired in state. And line producers would come on board shows and it was like, well, who do you know in this state? Who can you work with? Who can you call tomorrow? We're getting the show started ASAP.
That's right.
And that helps so much. And so back to our earlier points, like building your network and who is to your left and who is to your right. Those people are not always going to live in the same city as you. And so it will help you expand your network and maybe make your dream project in another city because that's where you know people and that can be a beautiful thing.
Well, you know, Steve Jobs famously said that you can only connect the dots looking backwards. And, and when you do that, it's always fascinating where you're like, I could never have predicted that meeting this random person ended up years later in a job. Like you just don't know where things are going to come from.
That's
which
certainly
is why,
my career. Yeah.
and mine as well, which is why I like this idea of like, regardless of where you're at, being a person of integrity, being a person of your word, being a hard worker, being a person who follows through, that is so important because that imprints on others in ways you don't know. And it's outside of your control. You can just show up and do the best version of you every time and get better and sharper in the skill set that you have, that you're acquiring. I think it's super important. But, you know, with producing, there is a ton of different types, but historically there was one producer, right? If you go back to like 20, 30 years ago, probably longer, you look at any credit of any movies before the 90s, you had a handful of producers. And now all of a sudden you have 20, 30 people who are listed as producers or EPs on that. And it's bifurcated a lot of what the producer role does. And there's a whole movement with Producers United trying to figure out how do we reclaim what the producer means? How do we stop diluting the credit and the value of what the producer job is? Because it is a job, right? And some people make their livelihoods as a producer, and others are managers who produce and are getting a salary over here, or are talent who produce and are also going to be making money as talent and whatever endorsement deals. And so to me, it's like, it doesn't discredit their input into the process, but the person that is responsible, if there's a problem, who are you going to call to solve that problem? To me, that is the producer of the project. And when I'm like looking to see who actually made this, who was on the field, who was there every day, like that's the producer. And everybody else has place and value in the ecosystem for a variety of reasons. But we should really be lifting up that particular person, or sometimes two people. It's never really more than two people, honestly. If you really get down to brass tacks, I mean, look at Anora. That was made by two producers. 3 if you consider Sean Baker, who was also very producerial and very much a producer in the project, but 2 producers.
When I think about directing and being in the moment on set, you've done a ton of producerial work until that point. And yes, you are a producer, but like you need other people if you're going to be wearing multiple hats. And you need people you can really trust.
Really trust. You have to trust your producer, but the producer has to trust and believe inherently and empirically in that director's vision, because you're going to be doing anything and everything necessary within the parameters of the law to like make it happen for your filmmaker, you know, at its best. When people hear about a producer, that's usually the sort of archetype of the producer that you're thinking of. But there's many different kinds of producers, as you alluded to. So typically now your line producer, which is back to sort of my story, interjecting that after I started making commercials and I got into the independent feature game, I started to realize, oh, like no matter what the budget is, the line producer never gets cut from the budget. You're always going to need your line producer,
because the line producer
UPM.
is usually making the budget,
And
with
they're
the
making
UPM.
the budget, and they are also the ones deploying everything. And in the indie space, your line producer and your UPM, which stands for unit production manager, are often one and the same. Traditionally, your line producer is handling the budget and dealing with the studio or the financiers, and then they're delegating that to your production manager, who then runs the production, right? And talks to all the department heads to sort their budget. They're there on the ground figuring out the problems. I have done both jobs in one most of my career. And when I discovered that one that was a job, it was really empowering to go, so this is how it all gets put together. Yeah. This is how decisions get made about how do we take this and go from page to screen? What is actually required? And to see that in real time was really, really helpful. But that's when I learned, okay, this is the line producer. And as you ascend as a line producer, it is such an important job and an important part of the filmmaking process that the ones who ascend become executive producers. They get EP credits on things because they warrant that kind of like recognition, not just because they are asking for it half the time, you know?
Totally.
And then, you know, UPM, there's a DGA UPM. So when your show is DGA, then you have to hire someone who is DG UPM. Sometimes that person also can line produce. It just depends. But then there's within the producer umbrella, you have like your more traditional creative producer type that often can mean the person who has come up more on the development side.
And champion the project.
The project. They found the filmmaker out of Sundance. They've been developing them. You know, they were the one that really pushed the project forward. They had relationships with talent reps and they were able to attach X person. And maybe then another producer comes in because they have relationships with financing and they bring in the financing. And all of these players are important. Sometimes you get people who can do all of those things, but sometimes not. And so that's why you have so many different producers and so many different projects. And then when it's all said and done, that's when they go, we have the talent, we have the money. How much do we make it for? Where do we shoot it? How do we do this? And that's when someone calls someone like me, is to figure out how do we actually make this movie for a price that makes sense for the market with the cast that you have. And there's, again, a lot of power in understanding that piece of the puzzle, especially if you're a creative, because then you can not be so upset by the process, but understand that regardless of what you think and want to make your movie for, there is a sweet spot that's going to make sense on the distribution side so you can actually sell your movie and make money.
100%. And that is something that I've noticed with friends. I have many filmmaker friends who've had their features premiere at Sundance, South by, whatever. And there's this somewhat upsetting thing as a friend to be like, wow, it's so hard to then get distribution. It's already hard to make the movie. And then there's this whole other point at the back end. And one of the questions we got when we posted on social media asking like, questions do you have for a producer? It was, how do you make your project at the early stages and also on the back end attractive for distribution or for financiers? And obviously you need to go to the right people. It's again about that creative language. Are you speaking the same language? But also it's a business. And so is there a way to make it more attractive?
I mean, that is a whole podcast episode on itself, honestly.
I bet we could probably point people to a certain episode on your...
And frankly, I mean, the Mark Ankner podcast convo from South by is great. He was a partner at WME for almost 20 years. I mean, he built his way up to become partner and was in the indie finance group and helped finance a lot of like the best indies of our time. And even he talks about how hard it is. And he had a film premiere at South by that won South by. And distribution is still hard. So it's like you have to look at the entire pipeline, right? And you have to study our business. I think there's a lot of people that are creative and they go, well, it's show business and I don't care about the business. I just want to tell my art. But it's like, you can do your art in a vacuum all day long. But if you want to participate and profit from this business, you have to understand the rules and the mechanism of it, right? So what is happening with distribution? Think about you as an audience, as a viewer. Like, are you going to the theater to see everything? No. you're watching stuff on streaming. How engaged are you with what you're watching?
Yeah, how many shows are you watching also being on your phone?
How many shows are you watching, or just like half watching, being on your phone, not really watching, just giving the streaming numbers?
That was my hot take the other week. It makes me so sad.
And I'm not like throwing shade at anybody. It's just the reality of where we're at as a society.
You don't. Maybe you're
most people do this, no matter what age you are. I mean, I sit, and watch movies with my parents who are in their 60s, and they're like doing the same thing. So like, why? So how do you capture the audience of someone who, the attention of someone who is your right audience, but you're competing with everything else, with this oversaturation of content? I don't have the answer, and no one really does right now. I think that's part of why we're seeing this sort of like dismantling of traditional Hollywood, is because the traditional Hollywood model, at least, is because distribution is inherently broken. People can't make money on the back end like they used to, because now it's all streaming. So how does that impact the beginning of your pipeline? Well, it's less money. It's less money to make your stuff. It's less money to buy your thing that's made, because we don't know. We're not going to spend millions of dollars, because what are the odds that people are going to watch that?
I think there's two things that are so relevant to what you're talking about. One being the shrinkage. There's so much less shooting here, and that is because of what you're talking about, making it cheaper up front. And when I say here, I mean here specifically in Los Angeles, but in the States in general as well, it has gone down across the board. But it is cheaper in other states to film because of tax credits, because of rebates, and also shooting in places like Bulgaria or Croatia. Like, they are offering incentives to filmmakers that make it more possible, and then make the back end more desirable.
That's right. Yeah.
So,
and at the end of the day, if you're a creative, you want to put most money on screen. So if I offer you two options, I say, hey, we can shoot this in LA. We're only going to get $5 million to shoot this in LA, or we can go to France and we're going to shoot the exact same movie for $10 million. Yeah. And I'm talking about the substance specifically, because that was really the conversation that happened.
It's a very LA-based
Can you think of a more LA-based story that was shot in a place that is the furthest you can get from Hollywood?
I didn't know. I didn't even think about that.
Most people don't even know that. But if you are working in the industry and you watch some of those exterior shots of Hollywood,
you're so right.
You're always looking up at the sky into palm trees. You don't see the world. And that's the cheat, right? But that was a concession. You get LA, or you get the amount of time that you want to make your movie the way you want it. And Coralie chose to make her movie the way she wanted. She had a very specific vision that was not going to be doable in the States, period. Yeah. So like, what do you do as a filmmaker, as a producer, as an artist? Like, we're all having to contend with the realities.
It's these sacrifices.
And make these sacrifices and these concessions. And so it's always a conversation. And it's like, there isn't a one size fits all answer. But unfortunately, yes, like the cost of production in America, and certainly in Los Angeles, has gotten out of control. And most projects can't really survive, even if you get the California tax credit.
Yeah. And I just want, like, for the listeners to point you to, Carolina did a special episode with the Stay in LA movement organizers. Yes, I think that is a really great listen. And especially if you want to know more about this and these issues, and also what's being done to try to keep Hollywood as a industry town. Yeah. To anyone who might be at this stage in their career, if they are making their own things and they're like, I want to produce, and I'm working on my friend's project and I'm doing all this for no money, what is a good entry-level job for them to learn from folks with more experience, like being an assistant somewhere, or,
I think there's a multitude of paths, but in my humble opinion, you're going to get the most value out of being in production, because that's where things are made. And that's where all the money is really spent. So I think it's smart to go be like working in a commercial production office. Maybe you start as an office PA, you're making a little bit of money, you're seeing the insanity that is production within a 3-week timeline.
The chaos that you love so much.
The chaos. Love is, it's
a relative term.
Relative term. I've grown to love it, I guess. But no, you get to be around it and see it. And then you take those lessons and those relationships you start making, and you go, I'm going to take this and I'm going to go fine tune my own craft. I'm going to go produce my friend's thing on the weekend. We're shooting a scene in a house. Like, you keep it really small, and you're like fine tuning yourself as a producer and understanding, if you get like, okay, we're going to shoot a scene for a short and we have $500. Well, that's your budget. Like, how are you going to spend those $500? You got to feed people. You got to rent a couple things. Like, it's the same principle, right? Like, how do you make the best decision for the parameters that you have? So if you're looking to like make money while also learning this craft, to me, that's an easy way to do it. And I wouldn't say it's like an easy job to get, but it's much easier, in my opinion, than starting as an assistant in a more traditional, like at an agency.
Sure.
Or unless you get, I think if you get lucky and get to be a producer's assistant, great.
Yeah.
But even if you're a producer's assistant, you're going to be around the thing. You're not going to be doing the thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and there's value again to that as well. But I believe very much that, especially if you're in the beginning of your journey and you're a person maybe in your 20s and you have a lot more time and freedom, you don't have a ton of responsibilities, you don't have a family, a mortgage, all of these things that weigh you down, you can make those financial concessions right now and go be on set and get all of that out of your system so that in 5-10 years, you can shift more into an office-y kind of version of producing without having to be on set. But now you understand empirically what it means to execute. That's what I did, you know?
When you said the office cushy thing, we're coming off the White Lotus and I was just not meant to live an uncomfortable life.
Listen, I was not as well.
I think I was, man. I think that the grind is something that as I get older, of course, I'm like, thank goodness that I put in all those hours and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I'm sure at every stage there's going to be more, because there's always something to learn. And
there's
that's
always
what's so
more.
attractive.
And I think that's the thing that is so addictive about our industry is like you never arrive.
Yeah.
There's always a new milestone, a new mountain to climb, a new hurdle. However you want to look at that, if it's good or bad, there's always more to do, which is exciting, but also dangerous.
Yeah.
Because that means like you can often feel like you're not enough, like you're not doing enough. This is like everybody everywhere. After having done over 100 episodes of my podcast, like a lot of the juiciest conversations happen off mic still. And you hear how people really feel and the sentiments. And I've had conversations with some really impressive people, and then off mic, you hear these struggles and you're like, damn, like we're all in this shit together in the same way, in some way or another. And it's not to discourage, but it is like the realities of this path we've chosen. So finding things that can balance you and give you purpose beyond the chase and the grind of this, I think is super important for your mental health. It's something I talk about a lot, and I'm always in an endless search for it myself. I haven't mastered it, you know, because otherwise it can be really hard. You have seasons of your life that can make it really hard to like suit up and go to battle every day, because sometimes that's what it can feel like.
Yep. Totally.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to switch gears to you. And on the note of what I just asked, though, I am curious, like for you, how long have you been in LA? Just a quick little journey. And when you are feeling discouraged, like how do you feel you're well? What helps you kind of suit up and keep going, especially now and / in these last 5 years that have been so difficult for so many of us?
Yeah, well, I came to LA, grew up in New Jersey. My mom is an immigrant from Ukraine, and there's a big Ukrainian community in New York City on the Lower East Side. My dad is a Jersey boy through and through, and when they got married, they moved to New Jersey, and that's where I grew up. And I thought I wanted to do theater as well.
So you're first generation American?
Not on my dad's side.
Okay,
my mom.
On your mom's side. Okay.
Yeah, my mom, my grandparents moved to Germany. She was born there. Moved to Philly at first, and then New York. So around when she was 5. And yeah, I grew up with 2 parents who were journalists. Everyone in my family, for the most part, is a writer, and I thought I wanted to be a journalist as well. But I also loved performing, just like for my family and singing and all of that. And so do you
have any videos of you at this age that you feel comfortable sharing with the audience?
Oh God. I'm sure
I speak for myself.
Does.
I'm sure the Daddy Dailies audience would love to see some OG throwbacks to Vika at her finest.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I played with that camcorder. So
we all did. I have some juicy stuff too. That's why I'm like, I'd love to see what's in your camcorder.
Yes. I went to public school. I did theater. I ended up doing this program in high school at NYU that was called the Future Filmmakers Program. And they basically taught us how to use a camera, how to edit. It was 12 weekends in New York City. So I would go on the bus with my friend and spend the day making stuff. And it was a lot of NYU grad students who were like assuming they were getting credit for it, but like volunteering their time.
They were
teaching us stuff. And that was a real eye-opener to me, because everything else I knew had been theater-based or like performing at school. And I wrote a lot, and it was big fish, small pond, very small town. And I got praised for my writing. And so when it came time to apply for colleges, I was like, okay, this feels like the thing I keep being told I'm good at. And I applied to a bunch of programs for that. I ended up going to UCLA because I wanted a very traditional college experience. And I had applied to some conservatories and whatnot. And when it came down to it, I was like, but I want to like go to football games and, have this experience.
Yeah.
And I got in, and then I saw the school, and it was just a really beautiful experience. I ended up totally pivoting and being a musical theater major. And then my senior year, there were no shows being that the grad students got to pick the shows. There were no good roles for women.
Yeah.
And it was like the year that you're supposed to be getting cast and whatnot. And I got mad. I was like, this department is 75% women, and there's nothing for us to do. So I started writing again. I hadn't written most of college. And I made a web series, like very inspired by Issa Rae and Broad City. And I did that. And then I decided in that year I wanted to stay in LA. I had amazing internships. And to what we were saying earlier about the people I became really good friends with an assistant at one of my internships who got me my first job.
Yep.
I worked for a television writer, selling his expensive guitars and running around the city and like doing mail things for mail, M-A-I-L, mailings for him. And I just didn't really know what I was doing.
Yeah.
And that led to being a writer's PA on a television show that then got canceled.
What year was that?
I think that was around 2014, 2015.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I worked at Sony for almost 5 years. And that was not what I expected to do at all. It was a temp job opening, and I was like, unemployment, take this job. And I learned so much. I was in the production department. I can barely count. So me being around budgets and numbers was a real choice. But I learned an incredibly valuable lesson, which is writing to a number. And
say it again for the people in the back.
Writing to a number
because it's
means
important
that you understand if a budget is something that you can't have 4 explosions in your script.
That's right.
Or you can't add a dragon at the last minute. So this was something that I had never thought about before because I'd never been working with something that had real money.
I want to pause there because this is where sometimes line producers can get bad rep of like, well, they just don't want to help me make my vision. Well, they just don't want to da-da-da. And it's like, no, they have the constraints of like a finite amount of money, and they're helping guide you to work within the scope of what is doable and try to be a solution-oriented partner as opposed to like an enabler. Yeah. Because you can't just throw money at everything. And even if you could, we see that in Hollywood all the time. It doesn't mean you make a better product.
Yes.
Like the creative constraint actually makes you be better and tell better stories. They are like your best friend and not your enemy. They are not there to try to like derail your project. And that I've heard that ad nauseum, especially on the indie film side, of like the line producer being painted as like the bad guy.
Said no.
They're the no person. They just don't want to help anybody do anything. And it's like, you have no idea all the things they're juggling and all that's being weighed against the scales at all times. So no, I really appreciate you saying that from the writer's perspective, because I harp on this all the time.
I think that is so incredibly true. And it is in the presentation, the line producer, if you go to them and you say, this is what's important to me to tell this story, then they might not say, yes, go do that, but they might give you a creative solution that will give you the end result emotional impact of what you're going for.
That's right.
And I think after Sony, I got a job as a showrunner's assistant on S.W.A.T. I have been on the show seasons 5 through 8, and I wrote 2 episodes and got to shadow a director.
Amazing.
And it's been the most amazing growth experience of my career, but incredible line producer and UPM. Paul Bernard, James Skura. Now James Skura has been our line producer for the last 2 seasons, 1 season. And he's incredible at what he does and incredible at like figuring out what to do on an action show that has cars turning over, blowing up, people getting shot, like all of this stuff, and making it happen. And so I think being around that and the fact that I got to be in all these meetings. So my biggest lesson and piece of advice is that if you can be in a position to have an assistant or be in a position to help somebody, let them be a fly on the wall.
Yeah.
Because my first job, frankly, I didn't think I wanted to be a television writer because I didn't get to be a part of anything. I got lunches and I sat in an office and I was like, well, I am not learning anything.
Yeah.
I'm reading the scripts as they come out, but that's it.
Yeah.
And it kind of took the joy out of it and the excitement I had out of it. And the showrunner on that show had no idea I felt that way. And I didn't know what it was that I was feeling. I thought maybe I just want to act and I don't want to write, you know?
Well, because you didn't want to be like, you didn't move to LA to like be thrilled that you're just like answering phones and doing emails.
No, but I thought I should be grateful. And I don't know if that's a very specific like woman thing conditioning or not.
Maybe. But I also think like everyone knows this business is really built on mentorship and apprenticeship. Like you learn by being in the rooms, in the conversations. That's why I was saying like wherever you can be and lean in and be a part of that, it'll help you in whatever lane you end up entering the thing you want to be doing. So if you start out in post or you end up in a marketing department because you had a temp job that got you there and you're like, but I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to, like, there's always a zigzag that's going to get you there. And if you're smart, you can really vouch for yourself and advocate for yourself to get into, be listening to those conversations that all help inform your process and who you become as a storyteller, as a creative. And it's also important. Look at Ava DuVernay. I mean, she was a publicist who transition into filmmaking, right? So it's like, how do you take the thing that comes for you, the opportunities that are there and accessible to you, and lean in a way that you don't get lost in it if that's not where you want to be, but you like suck all the marrow out of it and get the most you can before you go, thank you so much, now it's time to move on.
Yeah. No, I think that's incredibly valuable. And the show has been canceled. So I've been forced into that next step of like.
How's that been?
Well, it's to your second part of that question of like, how do you fill up your cup? I think I'm such a doer and I love to work because I do creative work. Like I think it has value to be somebody who has a job where you clock in, clock out, and that's not your passion and you have your passion outside. For me, the two things are intertwined. My passion is also the thing I make money at, which means it's also when it's not going well or when the show ends, it is devastating.
Yeah. How do you process that grief?
I journal.
Okay.
I journal. I go to therapy. I think that it's also making a conscious effort that the relationships I've built on this show that are real friendships, maintaining that.
Yeah.
I had a friend on the show who went on to another show and he invites us over for pizza night every couple months, you know? And so that relationship is still really strong. Yeah. And I think it's maintaining the friendships. And for me, I always say that I love this business so much because I love people and I love art and I love collaborating, but I could be a novelist and write by myself and work with one or an editor and like a publisher, you know, and this is way more people. Yeah. And I love that. And so I don't want to take a job with jerks. And I hope that I'm as lucky as I was on this show to work with such kind, lovely people. And I think just reminding myself of the thing that is the value add, it's the education, it's the creativity, but it is the people that I was with every single day, especially on a network show where you only really have like a month off a year. Yeah. You really become a family. And to your point, like, you know, you met hundreds of people over the course of that show. You're not going to be friends with every single person. No. You may be friendly with some if you need a referral for something, you know, or put them down as a reference, like that'll help. But there will be some people you naturally gravitate towards. And that's the other part is like investing in those relationships because you genuinely like each other beyond just like whatever transactional thing. Yeah. That's why I was saying like somebody who's an assistant today for whatever reasons, that's their journey, could leapfrog you and then be show running in like 5 years. Yeah. And then you never know. You never know. So it's not like be friends with everybody because you never know. It's not like sticky and gross, right? Yeah. It's like, no, you don't know where people are going to end up. And so don't follow the title, follow the person. Yes. Because people because you like them. Because you like them and you have like a mutual connectivity that is beyond, again, just the transactional nature of this business. Yes. I do understand why some people feel the need to be transactional because it feels very like grasping at straws sometimes. You're like, well, if I can just find the right person and then your energy shifts and it's desperate and it's less about what you're connecting on. And you can tell if somebody like you said, it's like dating. You can tell if someone's like, I just want to find someone.
Exactly.
Versus I like you.
And also, frankly, like even in dating, sometimes you are transactional. Sometimes you just want sex, or sometimes you just want to go and have someone pay for your dinner or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's the same in Hollywood. And there's no shade. Sometimes you just need an agent to get back to you. Sometimes you just need that is also fine. And I think what took me a long time to learn is just knowing the difference between the two. Because especially in the beginning, I was like very vulnerable and very giving of myself to everybody. And I would be very like exposed in a way of like, here's what I'm feeling and here's what I'm going through. And like, I had to learn that like, you can use your vulnerability as a strength, but you have to know who to actually let in and be in your real inner circle that you can be real with. Because if you walk around like that with everybody, it's just, you know, everybody's got their own shit they're dealing with and everybody's feeling the heart of the industry. They don't need you to be like a puddle of tears every time because it's hard. So it's like having those people you can go to again that are going to help fill that cup so that you feel down today, but tomorrow you're back in the game and people are none the wiser. And again, it's not to like pretend like it's hard, it's easy. No. It's just that you have to get up every day and keep doing the thing and the work. That's what builds careers and years of like a trajectory that you can look at, you know?
And the mental portion of when things are going well and when they're not is giving your life a structure that feels good to you. Yeah. So I know that I feel depleted if it's only work. Between Not Your Daddy's films and my other job, it can be work. And I love both those things. But I've had to take a step back and be like, okay, what am I doing? It has nothing to do with my career.
It's hard though, right? Because even when you're like, I'm going to watch a movie for fun, it's like you can't.
Then you're like breaking down.
You're like breaking it down. You're like, who made this? And how do I get to me? Like, it's wild. You have to find a hobby completely. Notes. Like I did pottery like I did too last year because I was like, this is not connected to anything.
Yeah,
like,
and I was bad.
And that's great. Like to suck at something is so rewarding to be reminded of like what it feels like to be at the beginning because we're all at the beginning of whatever the thing. So when you meet a PA or when you get that random email from someone who's totally green and looking for advice, it's like we've all been there. Yeah. And again, helping nurture and guide that to the best of your ability because it's also not, you know, we're not running a nonprofit here. But like, it's important. But I want to ask you about Not Your Daddy because I'm so impressed with what you guys have built, how you guys sustain it. Like it's so impressive. I was rambling on about this on the phone with you, I believe, the first time we connected, because as someone who has been doing my show for over 5 years and mostly solo, I have like now wonderful young women who help me in exchange for mentorship. Like it is so much work to create and curate these communities and have a presence and like all the things. So I love to hear like the origin of how you guys all found each other, how you guys built it. But then the sustaining is honestly what's really impressive because I've met a lot of people that create things that kind of fizzle out after 6 months because we're all busy doing other things. And so tell us the story.
Well, long story short is that two of us, myself and Carly, had finished our short films around the same time that we had written and directed. We wanted to have a little screening with our friends. We were like, there are 10 minutes. Maybe we should do them together. Let's do a night of it, of shorts directed by women. And she was friends with a manager at a bar. They had a projector. It all came together very easy. And we invited like, I don't know, 30 to 50 of our friends amongst the 5 films that we showed. Then we all hung out and had a great time. And we were like, oh, that was great. And then people were like, when's the next one? We're like, oh, well, I mean, should we do it again? That was fun. And so there was a big gap, I would say, between those screenings, but the 5 of us came together, you know, one at a time through a friend. We didn't all know each other and we weren't all best friends at the time, but now we are. And I think maybe that's why it works, is that we came together for a common purpose, but we weren't already like Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, you know? And now we basically are the Spice Girls. Like we are so close. Know. Yeah, so we got together, we decided that we wanted to make this a company. And at first I had doubts. I was like, are we really doing something different here? But there was a niche to be filled because there are great organizations for filmmakers in this town, but a lot of them do have a barrier to entry. And we wanted to make a space where people could come together at every level and where it felt like an equal playing field because of what we've been talking about this whole episode, which is like the common ground of having things in common. So we have 2 pillars. It's empowerment and education. The empowerment portion is our original screening series. women and non-binary directors, documentaries, animation, drama, comedy. We try to make sure each screening, because it's only an hour block, is a variety of all of that. And that it used to be every other month. Now we do like 4 to 5 a year, depending on how it shakes out. It's a lot of work. Yes. And the work is incredible. And I think that we were adamant that the work had to be of a caliber that was impressive, and that was something, it didn't have to be a $50,000 short, you know, but it needs to be great storytelling. And I think that has also brought people back in terms of the growth of the company, is that there is quality there, and we learned to create a space where people could trust our taste. And then now, because they're all only 4 or 5, we also have a newsletter where we can spotlight other filmmakers, because there's beautiful work that we can't show because we're trying to create this variety. And there's also shorts that are longer than our 15-minute cap that we can then feature in the newsletter. The other part, the education part, is having panels, hands-on workshops. We got to work with Atlas Lenses and did a hands-on camera workshop with Ava Burkowski and Christina Dunlap, and that was just so exciting to have all these women and non-binary folks in a room getting their hands on the cameras and getting to try it all out and ask their questions. And I think that the nature of the company has generated these very frank conversations where there's no bullshit. And it's a little bit more real talk, but it's also, I think most of the people come through because they want to be inspired and they want to inspire. So it's people learning from each other. And it's a lot of work. Like, I don't want to pretend that it's not and that it's easy. It helps that there are 5 of us. The fact that you did a podcast by yourself for 6 years, I would have gone insane.
Yeah. I mean, I have sometimes, you know, and truly, like, I've had many, like, the show really began out of my own frustration of like not having a space like this, where like I was having conversations like this off mic all the time with producer friends and other women predominantly in the industry, because that's kind of how it began. And I was like, why aren't people talking about this? And I got to a point after Autism in Love where so many people came out of the woodwork wanting to pick my brain and take me to coffee. And I was just like, I'm like so overwhelmed and I don't know how to help every single person. I don't have the bandwidth for every single coffee.
You can't.
And I also am doing the same thing to people 10, 20 years my senior and want to pick their brain. So I'm like, if I can have these conversations in a capsule and share them with people, I get to like help others while also helping myself talk to people that I'm inspired by, that I want to learn from. And that's kind of was the seed of the show, but it was born out of my frustration of like the lack of this kind of conversation, particularly from a female perspective, and certainly not a producer's perspective. You know, there are some producer podcasts out there that are great, but they're all white men that are having those conversations. And it's very different, right? The journey, the trajectory, the challenges, all the things. And so it was really important to create that. But in the beginning, it was like a complete side hustle thing where I was literally producing episodes while I was like on set. I'd be like, 3 a.m. before a call, like trying to get an episode out because I was the one that decided I had to have weekly releases, like unrealistic expectations. And I also thought,
you're speaking my language.
I was like, oh, audio, how hard can it be? And it's like so hard. It's so much work. And I wasn't even doing video back then, but every time I felt like maybe I should stop, I got to throw in the towel. Like I have other things I'm trying to do. Somebody has always come out of literally nowhere and popped in my DMs or in my inbox and expressed how much the show brings them value and helps them feel seen or feel heard or feel less alone in this career path.
I love that.
And just the journey as a whole, I think, of navigating any aspect of this industry, even though we have community, can feel really lonely. And so for me, that's like, fuck, all right, I got to keep going. I can't let these people down, and so I just keep doing it. And then I blinked and I was like, oh my God, I've been doing it for so long. And I have been, I don't want to pretend like it's been just me, but I've had a bevy of incredible women predominantly who've reached out and been like, can I help with anything? And I'm like, yeah. And so they just kind of become a part of the show temporarily. And I'm like, what do you need? And how do I help you? And how do I mentor you? What introductions can I make? So I make it worth their while I can't pay them, I'm bringing hopefully other value into whatever their goals and aspirations is.
Yeah, it's a beautiful community.
So it is a lot of work. So I know it firsthand.
Yeah. The community aspect is what makes it all worthwhile.
Exactly.
Exactly. And the beautiful thing is that there's 5 of us. And when we are working on other things, we can pick up the slack for each other. We've developed a circular leadership style where we can each jump into the lead position when it's needed.
I love that.
And we also take point on different things. Like Carly and I produce and edit the podcast. Courtney works on booking guests. We all will like give notes on episodes and trim it down if they run over, that kind of thing, like the nitty gritty stuff.
Yeah.
Nicole has a background in graphic design. She does all of our like beautiful assets for events and things like that. So we're all bringing a different skill to it, and they happen to meld in a beautiful way.
Yeah.
And I think that we have so many goals for the company, and we want to start being able to offer grants and more mentorship and things like that. But we're 2.5 years old, and we've gone from 30 people to 350 people at events. So
that's incredible.
It's also like pacing yourself so that you don't burn out.
Yes.
Because like crashing out is such a popular term right now, and it's so true. You get really excited. The ball is rolling. You want to go with the momentum. But we had to have in our weekly meeting be like, listen, we want to do all this stuff, and we will. But it does not have to happen this month, this week, this year. We can be smart about how we stagger our things out so that it doesn't eat us alive, because we want to, that's dramatic, but we want to make sure that this is sustainable and that we can do it for the longevity of our careers.
Yeah. And that's brilliant advice, even for me, because I think it's hard and tempting, especially with the rise of like the importance of social media. We were talking about this before. Like, you got to now do video, you got to be on the TikTok, shoulder content, the amount of stuff. I'm like,
you feel like you have to be doing it all.
It's a full-time job, and you feel like you have to be doing it all, and you got to be in on the trends, and it's like exhausting, you know? Yeah. And so you have to be able to like take a step and take a pause and like focus on other things. Yeah. That's right. Sometimes that's what you need. I'm not very good at that. I'm like still trying to find my slowing down, whatever that means. Cause
I think you will. You have a kid now.
I do, even with a baby, you would think like, but somehow I have more time and more like energy for stuff. I want to have more time. I just have more energy because I feel even more like compelled to make shit happen. You know, I'm like running out of time, whatever that means.
I know.
It's crazy, but it is true. Like how motherhood makes you feel infinitely like you have more energy, but also like you just see the time passing in a completely different way. My son's about to be 1, you know, and I'm just like,
exciting.
Oh my God. So
well, I love the way your brain works, and I feel very like that's very synchronistic.
Yeah, I think so. I love that word, synchronicity.
Yeah, I mean, it feels very aligned with how I feel often. So I'm so curious what your hot take is going to be. We do this segment on Daddy Dailies where we have our guests give their hot take on something film related. It can be as silly as like there should be no food in the movie theater, or it can be like I'm really passionate about this director and no one talks about them. So if there's anything you got, lay it on us.
My hot take is like something I understand, but I just don't understand at the same time.
Okay.
Which is fandom. Okay.
Okay.
Like, I cannot for the life of me understand how someone, your typical like fan of something, will go to the ends of the earth to spend insane amounts of money to have like the cosmetics line. I'm not even talking about experiences. Experiences I actually understand because it's the studies prove that money spent on experiences is actually money well spent because you actually retain that value much more than the transactional thing, buying a purse for, you know, $10,000 versus a $10,000 experience and how that imprints. So I get like paying crazy amount of tickets, crazy amount of money for like Taylor Swift or Beyonce, even getting the merch, fine, I get that. But the psychology of why people are sort of like obsessed with things they don't need because somebody that they admire or a fan of like puts their stamp, like is really interesting to me. And that transcends to like sports fan. It doesn't just have to be in our industry. Like the idea of being so obsessed and obsessive about something that you feel is such a defining part of your identity that you will like, people will get into fights and go to jail over like their team. You know what I'm saying?
It's kind of how I feel about Disney adults, honestly.
Disney adults is another one. The psychology of humans is endlessly fascinating to me.
It's so fascinating.
And I'm just like, I understand again the psychology of it, but I've never gravitated towards that myself. Right?
No, I haven't either. But wouldn't it be funny if I was like, oh yeah, I own every item of Skims clothing because I'm obsessed
Skims is actually great product.
Skims is a great product.
So I'm not saying if you make a great product, amazing.
Sure.
But like, does every celebrity who makes lip gloss or a perfume need to be selling that perfume? Do we need the amount of merch that we have from an ecological standpoint. All that
I
shit's
agree
gonna
with you,
end up in a
no.
landfill. There are a sect of like mid-tier artists and performers who rely on merch to like
Yes.
make a living. I'm not talking about that. It's just this
No.
like obsession with
It's like
everything.
if you had a wine, you know, if
and
you
I
were like,
hope to one day.
if you were like Engel on producers Chardonnay.
Oh
like,
God, I don't drink Chardonnay. That's so offensive. Ah.
But that's what it always is. It's like the Martha Stewart. Like
This is the problem. This is why I would never sell Chardonnay when I
That's
make
so
wine.
funny.
Absolutely not. That's disgusting.
Title of ep: never sell Chardonnay.
Never sell Chardonnay. It's a very popular wine, so I'm probably doing it
Yeah.
myself a disservice. I don't understand why people who are financially struggling, yet they'll spend $20 on a lip gloss they don't need because like somebody's putting something out. So that's my hot take. Like, I don't get it. I respect it, sort of, but it's just like when I see it happening, I'm like, how did I not get caught up in this? Like, what's wrong with me?
I like that you gave that whole hot take and you still didn't yuck their yum. That's pretty impressive.
I don't yuck anybody's yum. That's me. Thank you so much. It's my hot take.
Okay, well, mine, I'm going to keep short and simple. My hot take is if you can't afford a good wig, I'm looking directly into camera. If you can't afford a good wig, don't use wigs in your movie. Because I have watched several lately with horrible hairlines. They don't make sense. You know, I'm going to call you out, Nicole Kidman. You are one of my favorite actresses and your wigs are so bad. And then I'll watch another movie and I'm like, hire that wig artist. Hire this person. Hire Moira Fraser, who works on Abbott Elementary and is a fantastic hair artist. But yes, I often sometimes feel like I'm watching a dramatic movie and it's the wigs from Schitt's Creek. So,
oh boy. Yeah. Listen, I get that.
If you want more of Carolina's hot takes and just industry knowledge, you can listen to Angle on Producers. If you want more of me, you can listen to Daddy Dailies. And we've got lots of information for all of you out there.
Yes, and I'm on all the socials. You can find me pretty easily via a Google search.
Amazing.
Yeah, follow me, hit me up. I also have a newsletter, have all the things. This has been so much fun. Thank you so much this is such a fun cross promo
I love
thing.
it.
I'm excited. Yeah. Thank you everyone for tuning in
Thanks for listening.
and hanging out with us.